Tarpon Toad is a kind of a unique looking fly, and it is designed specifically for tarpon, though it certainly will catch other species. The most unique part of the design is that this fly is designed to be cast to a fish, sink to a level where it will be where the fish can see it, and then plane because of the flat front of the fly, the flat head, and stay at that level in the fish's view for a much longer time, hopefully resulting in more strikes. That may or may not occur, but it certainly is important to give it a try. The guy who originated this pattern, I think his name was Morrison, used chartreuse thread exclusively for all of the color combinations that he made the fly in, and then this original had a bunny strip in the rear. They now are tied quite often in all marabou. I'm going to do the original version, which suggests that you bring the thread down around the bend just a little bit. So, we'll take a bit of bunny. This happens to be orange with black bars. I think it looks kind of neat, but for no particular other reason. And I'm going to trim a little bit of the hair away from the skin, leaving the skin exposed in the front edge. Trying to get it down as close as I can. Now, this is tied in inverted, or what it might appear to be upside down. Skin up, like so. You get the thread right down around the bend like that, and then you wrap this down really tight. And the whole idea is so that this won't ever move. The originators then used a contrasting color, often brown, flashabou. I'm going to use copper because it goes sort of with everything. Not very much, about 3 strands. And you want this to be about as long as the tail. These are most commonly tied on hooks from 1/0 to 3/0. Occasionally smaller, but they're a little difficult to tie on a very small hook. When you tie the flashabou in, it's probably a pretty good idea to double back over it just so that you tie it down securely and it can't pull out and cut your excess away. And wrap that down securely. Now you notice that I'm working pretty far back here. The point of the hook's way up here, and all the material I've tied in so far is well back behind it. I'm going to take a couple of nice big marabou plumes, and the way that these are tied in is a little unusual. Hold it by the tip, and you'd expect that you'd use the tip portion, the nicest piece of the marabou, to do the tying, but that's not the case. You can get the fibers about the right length. I usually moisten the tip so that it's easy to tie in. Wrap it down, fold it back, and then cut off the tip section. Now I'm going to move my thread forward out of the way, and I'm going to wrap this around the hook shank, working it slowly forward and making a point of trying to keep all these fibers from getting trapped. We're going to go to a point where the fibers no longer are the right dimension for the fly, and they get too fuzzy, and we'll then replace this feather with another. You really have to take the time to tease everything out as you go here. Another way to tell about the right time to stop using a feather is to pay attention to the shank of the shaft of the feather. It starts getting thick right about at the same point where you want to stop using it. And when you get there, take a couple of turns, make sure everything's not trapped, and then cut away the excess bit of the feather. Pull everything back once you've done that. And here I've got a bit of the quill, the center of the shaft, sticking out of there. Don't want that. We'll cut that off. Pull it all back nice and neatly, hold it, and wrap that down securely. And then get your thread right in front of it. We are just barely at the point of the hook and still working on it. And do the same thing again with another marabou feather. Tie it in, hold it back, we don't even have to remove the excess of this one. It's about the same as everything else. We'll just leave it there. Get my thread out of the way again and wrap forward.
Hello? Yep. Hey. Yeah.
And then tie off that feather. Again, a little moisture, pull everything back, and tie it down securely.
Mm-hmm.
Now, next thing we're going to do is start using some yarn. This is a polypropylene yarn, and we can tie it in segments to create the flat head. And you figure eight it in place, wrapping it down.
Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Good. If I'm talking softly, because we're recording it.
Like so. Once it's in place, you want to pull it back as tightly as you can and make sure that it's securely figure-eighted onto the hook shank. You'll find that the marabou can be a bit of a pain trying to not trap fibers while you're trying to get this in place. Once in place and to the sides, I try to pull it back and catch the very end of it with some thread wrap, and then stand it out to the sides again and slightly up if you can. Then you just repeat the same thing. You'll end up doing this probably 4 times for an average fly. Once you get it in place, a little in front of where you think you ought to be, you just push it back, get it nice and tight. And again, pulling it back on the sides, catch the yarn thread, wrap it in place. We're keeping it flat and to the sides as well as possible. As long as it's long enough to stick out there a ways, there's no need at all to worry about making these all uniform. But they do have to extend out a ways. Couple turns. Push it back. Use too many wraps of thread, you would not be able to push it back. I'm going to moisten that marabou a little bit to keep it out of my life. So I go ahead and do this. If I were going to tie a whole bunch of these, you might expect that I would do the whole back section of the fly first, and then this, and just do major portions one thing at a time. And it probably would be easier to tie these in commercial lots doing that. There are also other ways of tying these materials in that are faster and generally not something you would do using exactly these materials. I'm leaving myself a little bit too much space here for just 4 pieces. So we'll go a little further and do 5. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we'll give it a 5th one. Doesn't matter. This yarn is essentially a wing, a means of letting this fly coast along at a level plane all it is. Get that back there. That's enough. Now, moisten that marabou. Pull it away from my yarn. I'm going to throw a half hitch in here for the moment. Now, because I want this marabou or this yarn to look like it's all one piece of stuff, I don't want these strands all individually apart like this. So I'm going to take a comb and I'm going to comb these and comb them out to make them look like a lot of individual fibers. Do that on both sides. Now we have something that looks sort of like a giant butterfly. We don't want things to move around on us at this point, so we're going to take a little head cement and we're going to go right down through the middle here and just saturate that. Give that a little bit of time to set up. Then we're going to, next step is going to be to add eyes to this. And the eyes for this fly are plastic. Don't want to add any weight. You don't want this fly to dive head first. You want it to stay level. The reason for all this bulk back here is to provide a little bit of flotation for the back of the hook. The reason for all of this material is really like the dive planes on the front of a submarine. When they're straight and level, the submarine is going to go straight underwater. You want to get this in front of the fish and keep it there. The plastic eyes serve a couple of functions. One, kind of looks neat. Two, it provides a means of trimming these big wings and using the fly as part of the guideline to do that. So, we're going to get our thread a little closer, and we're going to tie these eyes in front of our butterfly here. Couple of turns to get them in place, and then you can kind of do what you did before, pull everything back push the eyes back as tight as you can against the wings and make a nice head right in front of them. Hold them in place. Now they are going to be the focal point, or the spot that you use to trim those big wings off the sides of the fly. If I set the scissors from the eye of the hook across the eye I've tied onto the fly and slowly trim my way down at an angle, they form a very uniform shape to my head. And I can adjust that by trimming back any extraneous loose stuff. And then I can turn the fly over and do exactly the same on the other side. Since those scissors are fighting me, I'll get a sharper pair. Okay, we have our shape. I'm going to take my head cement and thoroughly coat that along the spine where it's attached to the hook shank. Again, brush a little across the top and put plenty of it around my little plastic eyes. And that is the basic traditional tarpon toad. Plumes of marabou tied in about the same length, one on top of the other. If you were doing a marabou version of this, you would do the same thing with marabou plumes wrapping in front of it, and then you would add one more material, a saddle hackle wrapped in front of the marabou before you went to the next stage, which is the big flat head, just to help keep everything back and out of the way. Other than that, it's virtually identical.